one of the biggest things that helped me when it came to, choosing my classes and everything abroad was definitely just keeping communication with my CSU Spanish advisor. When I first booked my flight to, from LAX to Spain, I was under the impression that I was only allowed to bring one luggage. And so, one. And so I was just like, how am I going to pack my whole 1 year experience in one luggage? Keeping a notebook in hand and kind of just going over it every month and just seeing it visually really helped a lot. And just kind of keeping in mind, those dates. For me, it was like when financial aid was released, my scholarships and everything, kind of just going about that as well.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the CSU IP YouTube channel. I am Whitney Matthews and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's Q&A video all about Spain. So today I am joined here with the lovely Miriam Gabriel, who studied at the Universidad de Granada in Granada, Spain. That is a mouthful for someone who does not speak Spanish. But hello Miriam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Miriam Gabriel. I studied at the Universidad de Granada in Spain during the 2019-2020 academic year, and my current CSU campus is Cal State Northridge.
Cool. So before we jump into the Q&A, I have to make a disclaimer that all the information that's given in today's video is extremely accurate and is based on Miriam's time while she was abroad. So if you want more current and more up-to-date information, you can visit CSUIP at calstate.edu. And this also will be a two-part video. So this will be part one, and in part two, we'll be covering things such as host culture, daily life, all those types of things. So without further ado, don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, let's jump on in to the video. So the first topic that we're going to tackle in today's video is academics, the big woohoo. So to start, what is it like choosing classes abroad, and what is it like enrolling in them and picking your professors and all that?
Right. Well, honestly, one of the biggest things that helped me when it came to, choosing my classes and everything abroad was definitely just keeping communication with my CSU Spanish advisor. And so, just before even just heading out to Spain, one of the great things that is really urged throughout the whole application process is to, communicate with your advisor about, your classes and everything. So when you're actually out there, it's way easier to choose what exactly it is that you want. I know for some of my friends who were out there, and when it was time to choose classes and everything, they actually had a lot of difficulty, picking what it is that they wanted to do, because it just wasn't really clear with exactly what classes would actually count towards their major, or, it was just kind of like a really big fiasco for some of them. And so, but when it came to my personal experience, it was honestly a very smooth ride. Like I knew exactly what it is that I wanted, anything that was going to fulfill my minor. And so the big key to that was definitely, just kind of keeping that open communication with that advisor, even before this whole thing even started.
So what's different in the grading system here in the US versus how it was in Granada?
Yes, so the grading system is actually very different because, here in the US, we're actually used to letters, but in Spain, they actually do numbers. So, they go from 1 to 10. And so, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. And so that's pretty much like where your grade kind of falls in. And so in the beginning, I think during the summer, we kind of all had to go through like this summer intensive like Spanish course. And so I remember kind of receiving my grade the first time and I was like, what does 10 mean, And then that's when I kind of like found out like, oh, that's this, and it's not letters anymore, it's numbers. So that was a little bit different, but once you kind of got into the whole classes and kind of get a feel for like the professors and all, you kind of understand like what it is with the numbers and what it all means as well.
Yeah, I know, just for any of you who don't know in the video, but I studied abroad in France, and so they go by numbers as well.
Yeah,
There's this
I think
one.
it's like a European thing.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of, I don't know, it's all back
Yeah.
to us. But yeah, so they also go by numbers, just
Mm-hmm.
fun fact. So next let's talk about class structure and how do assignments work, how do exams work, kind of talk about that.
Right. So, let's see. So for me, I kind of mentioned like the whole little summer intensive Spanish course that we all had to take prior to actually starting the semester. So that was actually something I was not aware about. So once we actually arrived to Granada, Spain, and everything, we were kind of given like a few days off, and then after we were kind of just like thrown into like the summer course that we were all forced to kind of take. And so during that course, they kind of just wanted to get a feeling of what our Spanish level speaking language skills were like. And then so from there, they would pretty much determine, the types of classes that you would kind of be enrolled following, whatever grade level you kind of got. And so for me personally, Spanish, I'm very comfortable speaking. It's my native language. So I was in the more advanced courses. So most of my assignments and workloads were around that level, a little bit more Spanish advanced and everything. So, but personally for me, it was very easy. As opposed to my actual major, kinesiology, it's very science, derived and everything. And, Spanish for me is a little bit more laid back. I enjoy learning about it and everything, but it was more doable for me. So the workloads and, the assignments and everything were definitely more manageable. I think when it came to maybe some of the history and the geography, that's where I kind of got a little bit more like, okay, I need to put more attention to this. But professors were very well well informed about how to help students and how to talk about certain subjects in a way that you could understand what it is that they're trying to say and communicate. So as far as that, I would say I didn't stress so much when it came to studying to test to material, because most of the time when I was assigned something, I would just kind of work on it right away and not spend too much time kind of just like leaving it on the side or anything like that.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned a little bit how the professors were well informed, but can you kind of talk about how the relationship was between the professor and the student in Spain versus how it was in the US? Was it different? Was it the same? Kind of talk about that.
Yeah, so actually it's very, very different. So first of all, one of the first things is that they don't go by their last name. They actually go by their first name. So when you actually talk to them or, you want to direct them, you have to kind of like, address them by their first name. So it's more personable, and just kind of going with that in general, that's how the whole interaction is. They like to be treated as like a friend, like a personal friend, as kind of like a family member. Whereas, here in the US, we're very accustomed as to like the student and the teacher, and that's like two different like little entities right there. But over there it's very much like if you kind of see them walking down the street, it's like, hey, you have a conversation, and it's like they might want to have coffee with you or something. It's very, very approachable. And so that's kind of like the whole idea, and it kind of just also goes back to like the whole culture over there. It's like everybody's like family, friends. There's no such thing as like personal distance. It's like, you know, they want to hug you, they want a kiss on the cheek and everything. And so that's how it pretty much is also. I remember a few times where, you know, they would ask me questions about like kind of very personal questions about like, oh, you know, my life and you in LA and everything. And so I was like, oh, okay, like what is too much to say and everything. But for them, there's no such thing as like you know, a student or a teacher. It's kind of just like one whole interaction altogether. And, you know, there's no such thing as like, you know, levels or anything like that. Very, very personable.
And how do you think that personable environment kind of shaped your learning? Do you think it made you a more successful student? Do you think it was like, oh, this is kind of weird? Like, how did you perceive that and accept that?
Yeah, so at first I was a little bit taken back by it because, you know, I'm very used to just having my personal space, I guess, and just having that space being respected as well. And, you know, it's kind of like the same way I treat others as well, you know. It's like even when I'm getting to learn about someone new for the first time, it's like, you know, I kind of watch them from afar and just like slowly kind of like integrate myself in there. And so, you know, kind of just going back to that question, it's kind of like the same thing. At first, it was a little bit like, okay, but the more I kind of just observed the way they interact with others, with students, it made me feel more comfortable just in general to just even ask questions in class and not feel so intimidated by like, you know, am I saying this correctly or not? Like, you know, that as time kind of went by, that was kind of the last of my concerns. And so it kind of just made me feel like, you know, people want to be you want to be able to interact with people at a more personal level, and you should be able to do that. You know, it's like, yes, there's personal space and everything, but it's also the way you kind of like address something. It's your wording and everything. And so I think if you go about that the good way, it's like there's no such thing as like, you know, asking kind of like a bad question, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, that's super important, and that you
Mm-hmm.
felt comfortable enough to um, kind of be that personal with your professor.
Mm-hmm.
So to end out the academics section, can you kind of talk about books? Were they required? Were they free? Did you have to buy them like we do in the US? Was there a library? So kind of talk about the whole books and how that process goes.
Yeah, so as far as like materials, I actually never purchased a textbook for any of my courses. And so that's actually a very common thing. I kind of assume because it happened for both of my semesters. I think the only one time there was a workbook provided, but it was provided by the professor, you know? And so, yeah, as far as like textbooks and materials, they don't really use any of that. It's more like they kind of lecture out of PowerPoints and everything. So it's kind of up to you to, you know, take notes and everything. And as far as the library, there was a very small library that we had. And so students were able to access information and books and everything, kind of check out as you normally would as at your regular campus. And so that was very easy to, there wasn't a ton of books, but, you know, there were, you know, everything was accessible. But the other thing with that too is that in the beginning, when you start studying abroad, at least in Granada, you're kind of set at a different school. So you're not necessarily studying at the actual Universidad de Granada. It's only until your second semester if you decide to take courses at the Universidad de Granada level. At that little location, it's kind of like a small little language international school where you're kind of around some of the other international kids. And so, yeah, so the resources there are very minimal, but when you get into the actual Universidad de Granada, there's actually different institutes depending on your major. And so they each have their own academic resources that you can access. And so they actually let us know that in the very beginning, you know, if maybe you're interested in science, astronomy, or anything, you just got to make sure you go to the right faculty in order to access their sources and kind of go from there.
That's so cool. So
Mm-hmm.
did you decide to go to the main school, like, and not stay in that little like international bubble? Is what I kind of call it.
Right. Yeah. So for me, for my first semester, I actually kind of stayed in the little school because I kind of just wanted to get familiarized with what exactly it was that I was going to expect, and so yeah, it was more, I guess, like a comfortable thing I wanted to do first, just to kind of get like, get myself going a little bit and see what it was going to be about. The only con about that is that you're not actually interacting with Spanish college students. You're only interacting with other international students who are also studying abroad. And so for the majority of the time, the only interaction that you have in Spanish is with the professors, because as soon as you're in class, you're talking Spanish for the whole 40 minutes of class, and as soon as you step out, English again. And it's because it's that environment. All of the students in that little school are studying abroad as you, and so that's the only con. And so, but when you actually get to go to the Universidad level, it's like you're literally with all the other Spanish college students. And so, yeah, that's the great thing, because if you obviously, you're studying abroad, as far as like for me, language, I wanted to be more immersed in like the Spanish language. And so I wish I would have known that before, but I know for me, it was also something that I kind of just wanted to slowly kind of get into. And so, yeah, it wasn't only until the second semester where I actually got into the Universidad level when I was able to experience like the full thing. Obviously COVID, but but yeah, that's when it kind of got more real, and that it was just a whole other ball game as well.
Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that was good though, because it gave you time to kind of get used to the classroom structure and all that thing at the smaller school, and then
exactly
towards in the second semester you were able to kind of go to the big leagues and really.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So next we're going to talk about traveling, which I'm sure many of our viewers here are super excited to hear all about the fabulous places that you went. So to start, how do you think, not how, like what would you recommend luggage wise in terms of one, packing to go to Spain, and then also traveling around Europe? So what type of luggage should you bring for both of those scenarios?
Right, yeah. So, okay, first of all, this is where I kind of like, me personally, I messed up a little bit. So when I first booked my flight to, from LAX to Spain, I was under the impression that I was only allowed to bring one luggage. And so, one. And so I was just like, how am I going to pack my whole 1 year experience in one luggage? And it's not a big deal, but when you kind of think about it, you're like, and so I remember kind of just like sitting some nights with my mom, like, kind of just like packing together, and like, she was like, honey, like like you kind of got to prioritize here, like winter and everything. And, they were going to visit obviously and kind of bring some stuff over, but it was still like, I don't know what the seasons are over there, like what what everything is like. So I packed everything, one luggage and my one JanSport kind of backpack, and that was it. And then when I'm, some of my other friends are bringing like 3 luggages and everything, and it's just like, I didn't want to pay extra for luggage, so I was like, I'm just gonna, listen to what's going on here. And then when I'm actually at the airport, it's like, oh, so it's just 1, not 2. I was like, oh yeah, no, it's just 1. Like, oh, you could have brought 2, I'm just like, oh, okay, so, but it was fine because, when I was actually over there, it made everything so much more easier. Like when, it was time to unpack and everything, I literally had my little sets of clothing and everything. And so it was just way easier as far as like getting dressed and everything. And, kind of just, it kind of just made my life more easier. And it kind of just made, not having to worry about like, oh, what am I going to wear today type of thing. It was just kind of like, just kind of go with that and everything. So, which actually came in very handy, because when it was actually time to travel, the only thing I would kind of travel with was like my one backpack, or like that one suitcase I had kind of brought with me. And so most of the time with a lot of the flights, you were allowed to bring like one luggage and one carry-on. And so it just worked out very well. And so for a lot of the trips I did, you know, they weren't more than like 3 or 4 days. So it was just perfectly fine to kind of just bring my little sets of clothes. But yeah, so that was just kind of very funny when I actually got there. It was just like, oh, you could have brought 2 luggages, not just one. So yeah.
I'm sure your face when they told you that, you're like, are you serious? My mom and I have been agonizing for however long as to how to pack my whole life for years. This one suitcase. And literally, like, they're like, no, you could have brought 2. So that's
yeah. Lovely. Now I know. International flights.
You're ready for round 2.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. So what did you take initially in that one suitcase? Did you, like, I know you said your family kind of brought things along the way as they came to visit, but how much did you take when you came, and how much did you take when you traveled to other European countries?
Yeah, so when I actually went, you know, I honestly packed just the necessary. So I'm talking about like 7 pairs of underwear, 7 pairs of socks, like literally that's it. And like one coat and just, you know, everything kind of there. One of the important things I definitely did have to kind of keep in mind was just like, you know, little toiletries and stuff like that, you know, as far as going through TSA and stuff. Personally, that was my second time being in a plane, so I'm still very new to when it comes to all that. I've only traveled, well, before that it had only been once from like a work trip from like San Francisco to LA, and so that was my first time in a plane ever. And so you know, going from San Francisco to like now LA to Spain, it was just like, what's going on, you know? And so, yeah, just honestly packing the necessary. So before you actually, you know, kind of, once you get accepted into your program, there's actually a little packing list which is literally what I went by, and it was just very helpful. So, you know, as far as like what to pack and everything, I kind of just went by the list and everything, and just kind of getting those little essentials going on. One of the most important things I would say though is to definitely pack a charger that is for your specific country, because the outlets over there, you know, they're so different. And so I remember I grabbed one from Amazon, which allowed me to convert it into UK, Spain, and like US and everything. So I literally took that everywhere, because believe it or not, it's you think it's just something like an outlet, but it actually it's more bigger than that. You're like, oh wow, you know, how am I gonna, you know, electronics and everything. Most of our electronics are like US made and stuff like that or whatnot. So, so yeah, that was actually my most little important thing right there. But yeah, as far as like packing when to travel, I usually packed like very, very, very light. Again, just, you know, underwear, socks for like whatever event I was kind of going throughout that day. Maybe a nice little outfit for like Instagram or something. And like, you know,
yes,
especially when I
was so important.
Yes. And so and then also kind of just also knowing like what the weather was going to be like depending on the location I was going. I know when I decided to do a lot of my traveling around Europe, I decided to travel in January, which is supposed to be one of the coldest times, like, you know, in Europe in general. And so people tend to like not travel because it kind of just like the temperature just kind of like, you know, deviates people from like doing so. And so I remember like having to pack like warm clothes and everything throughout that. And so, but my one luggage was perfectly fine. I mean, when I was kind of going around and everything, also just kind of buying stuff, you know, at like certain like H&Ms and stuff like that, Zara's like really helped too along the way. And so, but one of the things I didn't kind of count for was that when I actually had to leave Spain, my family had brought stuff for me, and so they were going to take a second trip back where they were going to actually leave Spain and come back to LA with me. And so I was kind of counting on them for them to bring some of those supplies back. And so when everything, you know, kind of went down, I was kind of just forced to bring all that stuff myself. So I actually had to buy an extra luggage, but I was fine because I had only, you know, the one luggage, so I was allowed to bring 2. So it worked out well, you know, it worked out really well. During my time abroad, I actually didn't really buy clothes and like all that stuff. I kind of just wanted to spend my money more on like traveling and experiences. So that's definitely more of like where my money went. So when it came to like, leaving stuff, I think I left a very few minor stuff like back and donated and everything. But coming back was pretty smooth as well because that second luggage definitely did come in handy.
Yeah, lucky for you. I had 4 going.
4, oh my God. Yeah, I can't imagine going through, oh wow.
Oh, it was a challenge. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
So what things would you recommend not bringing?
Not bringing. Let's see. I would recommend to not bring, for example, I guess for when it comes to like hair stuff and everything, curling irons and everything, I remember I was just like, oh, straightener, like, little days where you kind of want to get ready and everything. And, I remember I invested in like a small little straightener and everything to kind of bring out there. But when I was actually out in Granada, there were actually a lot of like secondhand shops that allowed you to buy like little things like that, electronic devices, things as like, hair curling irons and stuff like that. I remember I even bought like a blender and everything. And so it was just like, that's a tough question though, but huh. Yeah, I definitely have to think about that one because I feel like, definitely going by that packing list, it really kind of like also lets you know like what not to bring and like what you should bring. So that was definitely very, very helpful. I can't really think out of the top of my head like what those things were, but yeah, yeah, that's kind of like, yeah, I don't really remember so much about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to remember the nitty gritties of what and what not.
Yeah.
It has been a hot minute.
Yeah.
Home, so I don't blame you. So to kind of round out this section, can you kind of talk about some of the places that you traveled? Maybe your favorite place in Spain, maybe your favorite other European country that you visited, kind of anything around where you traveled to.
Yeah, so I was actually very, very fortunate because my program actually planned a lot of trips for us as like a whole group. So that was very, very fun because I was not aware of this at all. I thought it was just like, go into your program, study, and like that's it. But like no, in the beginning they were like, yeah, we're gonna travel together, we're gonna show you Spain and everything. And it was just like, okay. And so this actually goes kind of in part with your deposit. So in the beginning, you kind of leave this deposit and everything. And traveling, one of the great things also about traveling around Europe is it's so cheap, it's so convenient. It's like you can go somewhere for like $10-15, which is exactly what I did. I was able to go to like Paris, London, Barcelona, Rome for like literally 15 or 20 euros, and that was it. That's all I spent in my flights and everything. So it's very, very affordable. But yeah, so when we got to do some of the traveling with our group, we kind of got to explore a little bit of like the neighborhood cities in Spain. And so that was really, really nice because during those trips, they also had planned activities for us. I think one of the most memorable ones for me was during one of our trips out to, I believe it was Extremadura, somewhere out in Spain, more of the southern side as well. And so we got to go like horseback riding and like zip lining all in one day. And so that was just very, very fun because it was just like all like, all in just so much nature and landscape and everything and the mountains. And I personally love all that. I love the outdoors and everything. And so that was very, very fun. A lot of hikes as well with our groups. But yeah, some of my favorite location in Spain was definitely Sevilla. There was definitely a point where I kind of missed a little bit of like the city. And so Sevilla kind of just reminded me a little bit about LA. Like I remember seeing like what was it? I forgot what store it was where I was like, oh my God, that just reminds me of the US or something like that. Actually, that happened in London. I remember seeing like this is kind of dumb, but like I remember seeing like a Lululemon and I was like, what? There's a Lululemon like out here? Like it just reminded, or like having pho, you know, and so things like that. And I was just like, oh, it just reminded me of home. And so that was really, really nice. But yeah, Europe is so, so affordable. And I wish I definitely would have known this like before, because it was just something I found out when I was there, you know. It was like when it was time to book those travel tickets and everything, I was like, is this serious right now? Like, am I only paying $15 for a ticket from like Spain to London, or like $10? And you know, it's so so cheap. And yeah, that's yeah, I loved all that. I miss all that, and I'm definitely gonna come back and be able to, you know, kind of do some more traveling around Europe for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think Europe's got an unlock with the cheap travel.
Yes.
America needs to take note.
Yes. Not only that, but their transportation is so like, I don't know what we're doing out here, but it's like you can literally get from, you know, point A to point B in so many ways, and so cheap and affordable. And it's just so easy and convenient. And it's just like, I don't know. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel you. I
Hmm.
so the last topic that we're going to talk about is budgeting, which I'm sure a lot of our viewers are concerned about in terms of, you know,
Yes.
how am I going to pay for stuff? Like,
Yes.
I like feel their pain because I know I was like, oh, kind of stressed,
Yep.
but we'll kind of dive into that. So,
Hmm.
how did you budget during your time abroad? How much like did you kind of allot for each month for like rent and other necessities versus like traveling? So just kind of talk about your budgeting strategy while you were abroad.
Yeah, so as far as like budgeting, I definitely budgeted because again, yeah, I definitely wanted, you know, to put all my money more towards traveling and everything and just experiences. So I really didn't want to spend so much like on clothing and little things like that. If I needed, you know, little things, you know, I would go for it, but for the most part, it was like every month. So I definitely depended a lot on like my scholarships, my financial aid, and I did have to pull out some loans. But the loans, for example, were just like my backup in case something were to happen, and I kind of just needed that extra money. But for the most part, my scholarships and my financial aid definitely, you know, helped me a lot when it did come to budgeting. So you know, if you're someone who receives financial aid and you're kind of familiar with like the whole, you know, how that distribution goes out, you know, in the beginning of the semester you get like your full amount, and so that's kind of it. And so that was very helpful for me because, you know, when I was out there, our money did kick in very later, so they did let us know this beforehand. So I had actually saved a good amount to kind of just keep me going while I was out there. And so when my money did kind of kick in, it was like, okay, I literally had a notebook down every month. This is going to be rent. This is my approximate amount for food. This is for like, you know, little travel, little things like that. And that's how I kind of went for it. And so, I would do this every month and everything. And so that really helped seeing like a visual of like what exactly where my money is going and everything. And so, you know, kind of just keeping in mind, okay, next semester, you know, they're going to release my financial aid, my scholarships and everything this day and everything. So kind of have that ready to go as well. Okay, so in January, that's where I also plan to do more of my traveling. So, you know, kind of estimated amounts of how much I can afford to put into traveling and stuff, and, you know, kind of go from there. And so, yeah, one of the great things about Granada, for example, I guess in our estimated budget sheet that, you know, everyone can kind of see of like what it is when it comes to housing and expenses, they give you an estimate, and that's really good. But, you know, and so that's how I kind of went about, you know, my money and everything before I even like left. And so when I was actually there, though, it was way more cheaper than that. And so I was like, wow, okay. So at the end, I actually ended up having a little bit more money left over because I was kind of anticipating those estimated amounts I had seen in the worksheet. But, you know, actually living and, you know, the way I kind of just carry myself too with money, it was just like way more cheaper than that too. And so I would say probably my most money kind of went in like rent, but that was only because it was my only personal preference. For the most part, rent in Granada is very, very cheap. It's like 200, 300 a month. And so I was paying 600 because I kind of wanted like a bougie little lifestyle apartment with some friends. And so it was more of a comfortability thing, but that's where it was kind of went. But I knew I was able to afford that. It was like, okay. So, but yeah, there were so many little ways you could kind of get away with little things. And so keeping a notebook in hand and kind of just going over it every month and just seeing it visually really, really helped a lot. And just kind of keeping in mind, those dates. For me, it was like when financial aid was released, my scholarships and everything, kind of just going about that as well. And my backup, my loans and everything, just in case something were to happen, it's like having backup money as well. I know they recommended that we have American cash, US dollars in a little envelope, if anything, because when you're out there, it's like you have to exchange currency. And so if something were to happen, you come back, it's like you have zero money. So it's like kind of having some cash in hand, whether it's euros or, cash, depending on the city you're going. That's also a really great thing to do for sure.
Yeah, I want to kind of quickly go back. You talked about scholarships. So, are there any scholarships that you would recommend to any future students that want to study abroad in Granada? Were there any like that were specific to Spain or just in general to study abroad? Kind of talk about how you found your scholarships.
Yes. So, yeah, I knew from the very beginning, I definitely wanted to take advantage of these scholarships. So, whenever I kind of all the scholarships I applied were within my university. And so, when I was kind of just, filtering my searches, a lot of my searches contained like, words like studying abroad, first generation, Latino, Hispanic, female. And so little things filtering to some of those scholarships where I might have more of a chance in getting them and stuff. And so that's where it actually worked out for me for the most part. I know, so my major is kinesiology, and I decided to do a Spanish minor when I was abroad. So a lot of those searches also were language derived. So both of the scholarships that I got, actually one of them, yeah, one of them was just specifically like a Spanish language. So that was pretty great. And the other one was just like studying abroad. And so refining searches definitely made things a little bit more easier. I also applied to other ones, didn't get them, but it was just kind of like just getting into it that really, really helped. And so, yeah, that was definitely the thing, kind of just refining your search and everything, and definitely applying to them before the deadlines. And also, most of these scholarships do require like advisors or like professors or letters of rec. So that was also something I definitely wanted to keep in mind. So I remember, if there was a scholarship I had in mind, I would reach out to a professor and advisor like beforehand, because I also wanted to be respectful of their time as well. And so when I was kind of just ready to, kind of like let them know, I would write an email and just let them know like, hey, this is even my resume in here. This is some of the stuff I've done. So that way they were a little bit more considerate of my recommendation. But that's definitely something I would suggest when going about scholarships and everything. Definitely be respectful of your time and like someone else's time, especially if there is a letter of recommendation involved in there or something, because I think it's a little bit hard sometimes when you want to approach someone for the first time. It's like, I need a scholarship, letter of rec in like 2 weeks or something. And it's just like, so yeah, definitely be respectful of everyone and do your research for sure. Nothing's better than showing, that you've done your research about what it is that you want. Why is it that you deserve this scholarship and what do you want to do with it? For the most part, that goes a really long way.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you talked about being respectful of your professor and your advisor's time in terms of recommendations, because like they do have a life too.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
So our next topic under this big budget umbrella. So how did you access your money? Did you pull out money from an Spanish like ATM? Kind of how did you go about that?
Yeah, so one of the great things about that Well, about just CSUIP in general was that, you know, kind of like what we're doing right now. Beforehand, there were a lot of like alumni panels and everything catered to like different workshops. So I remember attending like a ton of those when they were like in person and everything. And so a lot of the alumni touched on this subject a lot because it was definitely an issue for many. And so that was definitely, you know, the just being able to access your money like on a daily basis. So I remember they all suggested opening a brokerage account or like a individual account, a card that was basically accessible like internationally. And so I remember that was very, very helpful. And they actually recommended a specific banker, which was Charles Schwab. And so with this card, it actually allowed you to be able to access any ATM like in Europe, internationally, anywhere where your fees would actually be paid back to you. So, you know, say if I needed $50, you know, it'd be the $50, then there'd be like a percentage charge. But at the end of the month, that percentage charge would be paid back to me. So that was really great to know because, you know, it did happen a few times where I did need some money and everything. And so, you know, kind of being aware of this and just knowing that, okay, my money is going to come back to me at the end of the month. So that was great. And then also just like the level of accessibility, I didn't really realize how accessible this card was. I remember I used it during all my travels, you know, all around. And I was a little bit hesitant, like, I don't know if it's going to work here, but, you know, but it ended up working all around everywhere, even like the sketchy little ATMs and everything, like everything was fine. Yeah. So I would definitely recommend this card for sure. And like this brokerage, I remember when I applied to it, it was super, super easy as well. I remember going to like, you know, my local area, Charles Schwab, and they were very, very nice. I remember telling them like, you know, I'm studying abroad. I'm going to be out there for a year. I kind of just need this card to be able to be accessible everywhere I go. And, you know, they talked to me about this and everything. And so that was really good. I actually still, so now I actually have that as my personal card now because it's just so convenient, you know, to use everywhere. And so, yeah, that was definitely very helpful.
So the last topic that we're going to cover for this particular video is how did you go about exchanging your money? Was there a place that you liked in Granada that you would exchange, or did you just solely use card? Like, how did you? Or I even know, just from my personal experience, cash
Mm-hmm.
is a lot more widely used. So did you use that? Like, talk about that.
Yeah, so as far as yeah, exchanging money, I actually never had to really exchange any money. I know there was like one currency exchange place like in like our area, but I mean the currency changes every day. So like sometimes, you know, if you wanted to do 50 US dollars and kind of change that, it's like you'd only come out with like $35. It was very expensive at times. And so you really had to kind of watch like the currency a day. And so I was like, that's too much for me. Like, you know, that's a lot. Like, I'm just gonna use my Charles Schwab card, you know, take out some money and like kind of plan this money out, you know, throughout the month and kind of just use it as I go. So I remember going to like getting my morning bread or something like, you know, my tea. I would just kind of use that money and whatever change I had, that's how I would pretty much go about like using it at places that only accepted, you know, cash or anything like that. And that was actually one of the biggest things in Granada. Most of the places did require, you know, they did not accept card. A lot of the time it was like, you know, euros and stuff. So that was actually pretty important. Every month I kind of just remember having to pull out, you know, like $50 or something like that, 50 euros, and pretty much that would last me for like the whole month, even rolling over to the next month because it's so cheap over there, everything. And so, yeah, that was definitely very helpful. But as far as like exchanging money and everything, I didn't really have to do a lot of that. I did just have like, you know, that back of money in case in US or like euros for any reason. But as far as exchanging, yeah, I didn't really do so much of that. My card was very convenient. It was very easy for me. And again, just being able to pull out money from ATM was very, very easy for me to do. And kind of just planning it like, okay, this month, $50 and everything. And it definitely went a long way as well.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of part one of this video. Thank you so much to Miriam for doing this and volunteering your time. Guys, don't forget to come back for part two. And we really hope that this video was helpful. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell again so you can be notified when part 2 is out. So lastly, don't forget to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I think I got them all. We have so many social media platforms, which are all at CSUIP. And see you all in part 2. Bye.